doctorate here at UNL. And I'm really glad that you are here and you, I hope so, will discover a great character in the flute world of the 20th century. I'm going to talk to you about the flute music of Raymond Guiot, who is a flutist, pedagogue, and composer, a French flutist, and who was actually my teacher for 2 years in Paris. Long time ago, don't ask. I would like to start by introducing Raymond Guiot to you. So here is some biographical information. I'm going to give this in a second. See? Raymond Guiot was born in October 5, 1930 in Roubaix. This is a city at the north of France. I don't know, you cannot see my pointer, that's okay. It's really in the border with Belgium at the north of France. And that city at that point was well known as the capital of fabrics. Nothing to do with music or art. And when he was 7 years old, he started going to the conservatory in Roubaix, just because that exists happily for us. And he entered the class of solfège of Fernand Dussault, who was also the flute teacher. And this was a very fortunate event because Dussault had been previously a student of Taffanel. Many of us, the flute players, we know the name of Taffanel for this huge and glorious method he has done with Gobert. And he graduated, Dussault graduated in 1902, playing nothing less than the Chaminade Concertino. So that was the year the concertino was written. Then Dussault became Guiot's teacher at Roubaix, and he worked there until he was 15 years old, more or less. But at the time he was 9, World War II started. And that is an important inflection point for anybody in the European culture of the 20th century. By 1940, his city, Roubaix, was occupied by Germans and was half destroyed. So at 15 years old, after war, right at the end of the war, he won the right to enter the Paris Conservatory. And the teacher there was still Gaston Prunel, to whom some pieces of the major repertoire for us in the flute series, in the flute side, the French flute repertoire, are dedicated, but also Marcel Moïse, who stopped teaching at the conservatory during the World War II, he came back in January, in the middle of the year, and so Guiot and some other friends, like, many of the biggest names of flute, became then Moïse's student. That's how he was a Moïse student from almost the beginning of his conservatoire of Paris experience. He was not yet 17 years old because he was born in October and he graduated in June when he graduated of the Paris Conservatory. Then, during those 2 years, he worked there with Prunel and Moïse. He gained, well, all the major repertoire for the flute, and he got what I think, and he agrees to, were the two main influences in his education. On one side, the repertoire and the style of the Paris, let's say, stream and style to play, and on the other hand, Moïse's pedagogy. He called, talking to me, he called Moïse le bon Dieu. That means the good God. That is exactly what Moïse represents for Guiot then. And I just want you to listen, well, in English, that's not exactly what he speaks. It doesn't matter, I did my very best. He talks in these terms about Moïse, about his pedagogy. He tells, he had searched so much himself, Moïse, that he taught us this way to work, searching on our own developing exercises appropriate to each one's different difficulties, as in high-level sport training. I know many hated him. That is not my case. I owe all to that man. So that is what he expressed about his teacher. His early career then, once he had graduated from the Paris Conservatory, it was still the after-war time. Europe was still half destroyed, and the work options there were at that point in that situation were mainly the remaining orchestras, teaching in the schools everywhere in those countries. Remember, most of it was half undone by the war, and working in commercial music and popular music. The jazz had started to be present in France because, well, the wartime made a connection with America. And on the other hand, the chanson française, the French song, the popular song, was also a way for the artists and for the people in those places to feel better and to heal. Then he worked on every single of these possibilities. He did it all. He made jazz, popular French chanson. He played in orchestras. He made chamber music. He taught. He did everything. In the beginning, after he graduated, he was just too young to stay alone in Paris and make a career. Then he moved back to the north of France. At first, the first position he held was as vocalist of the opera in Lille. This is another city very close to Roubaix, and very north of France, very close to Belgium. And he worked there from 1947 to 1950, so right after his graduation. And then after that, he moved to Calais, that is a little further on the west, and worked for 6 years there teaching at the École Nationale de Musique, the National Music School in Calais. There is where his interest in jazz and other popular music started. He met, among other musicians in Calais, he met Guy Pedersen, and that name is very important and very deeply related to Guiot, not only because they made many projects together, but also because he ended up marrying his sister. Okay, then while he was in Calais, teaching in Calais, in 1954, he prepared alone. He was already out of teacher, he was there in the woods, to say so, and he prepared alone, and not because he wanted to win it only, but because he wanted to keep his level and proficiency as a player. So he won the first prize, nothing less than the first prize in the Geneva International Flute Competition. That is still today one of the most difficult international competitions in the world. So that opened for him, of course, a new window, and that made his name appear again in the Paris circles. However, it was not until 1956, when he could come back to Paris because he won a position at the Garde Républicaine, that's the National Army Band in France. With that, as a means for supporting his living, he moved back to Paris and he started playing in jazz orchestras and as a studio artist. He played also many other kinds of popular music because he was, by the time, who was already proficient in bossa nova and Brazilian music, and also every other single string in popular music in vogue at that moment. As a studio artist, it's important, I think, because that can kind of center a little bit what he did. He did 3 to 4 hours of recordings every single day. Every day. So the amount of recordings you Paris Opera, this is where all the big names of the French flute had to be. And he was one of them then. He started playing in the Paris Opera in 1962, and he became solo flute, that means first flute of the orchestra, in 1974. And he stayed there until 1991. I call that the dream team because Elie, Guiot, Eustache, those are names that are still today very important for the French flute school. Many of you maybe have never known those names before, but the picture in the middle, the black and white, middle black and white one, is the Paris Opera Orchestra when he was playing, and he is the second from right to left. Maybe I'm asking too much to your eyes, I'm sorry about that. Well, that opened for him a new window. Of course he did, and his name was now among the main names of the flute of the world because of that. But he didn't stop playing popular music or making jazz or improvising or making commercial music. He also kept that side of his career. So he collaborated in one hand with names like Robert Elie. I have a recording. This is not the one I'm going to play because he plays the piano and Elie plays the flute. But this is a historical recording. Or Alain Marion, for whom he's composed some pieces and played with, or Raymond Guiot. Names like that are very important in the French tradition. On the other hand, he worked in jazz and popular music and made collaborations with names as big as Bolling. Claude Bolling is a very well-known musician. He has composed several jazz suites for either flute and jazz piano trio, or guitar and jazz piano trio, violin, etc., etc. And actually, Guiot was the first one to read the maquette of that, to read the draft. And even though the piece was dedicated to Rampal, he wanted Guiot to see how it worked. For instance, Stéphane Grappelli, that is another big name, he's one of the biggest jazz violin players in history. But they worked and they recorded together. Django Reinhardt and all names like Quincy Jones or Eddie Berkeley. But I want to play for you before you met Guiot the jazzman, Guiot the classical musician. Oh, this is that. Let me see if this can make it. That is one of his very, very rare classical recordings. He made mainly jazz and popular music. This was played when he was 62 years old. That's scary. Okay. In the other part of his career, in the popular musician career, he still does. He had not only collaborations, but he also made his own ensembles, his orchestra, and all that. And this is him putting together his classical string with his jazz proficiency. Oh. Okay. Give me 1 second, I need to do it. Okay? I'm going to forget. he has achieved. That is the musician, the player, the performer Guiot has been. But on the other hand, he developed a very important career as a pedagogue in flute course. I have to tell that he first taught also solfege when he was teaching in the north of France. But, well, since he moved to Paris in another level already, then he was completely devoted to the flute in every side of his career. So, as a pedagogue, he didn't start teaching in Paris right away. He started in the 70s, first at the Conservatoire in Paris, where I was his student, and he also became, in 77, Alain Marion's assistant for the flute class in the National Paris Conservatoire, where Moïse had taught before, when Tapanel taught before them, and Toulouse and many other names you already know, even Dudien. So he worked as a teacher until 1995, when he retired. He kept teaching some shorter courses around the world, but he stopped this kind of conservatory coursework. So he also taught in Canada, in Japan, in Italy, in Spain, and in France, of course, in Nice, in the International Summer Academy. His pedagogy, his teaching work, shows the influence of Moïse. Well, you can imagine after reading his expression of how they worked with Moïse and how he felt about how much influence of Moïse he could have had. One of the things that I find the most important about that is the fact that they both try to cover the complete spectrum of the flute. That means not only working on part of the difficulties, not only working on part of the register of the flute, but working on everything, and that reflects also on his compositions, at least the compositions for flute. Also, the expressive means of Guiot are, I dare to say, much influenced by Moïse. Moïse is known for not the singing flute as Campbell, not exactly. And Moïse didn't work in the Paris orchestra. He didn't actually accept the job. But anyway, that was part of Moïse's legacy. This etudes we have about expression in the tone development book that many of us work. That is part of the tradition in the French flute school, and that is part of what Guiot also made work. So that covers not only the technical aspect that he's so well known in the flute world for, but also the expression part of it. And we can imagine easily that he would have left it behind because he's a composer as well. In expression, on the topic of expression, his point of view is related, very much related, to phrasing in the sense of a language we talk. So he talks about construction, diction, punctuation, articulation, accentuation, rhetoric, and musical grammar. If we use those points of balance, we should be able to make sense out of the music we play. Either jazz, or popular music, or Mozart, or Bach. Then, on the technical mastery aspect, he also had the influence of Moïse, of course, here, and we know, we flutists, half of the audience tonight, we know that Moïse has a body like this huge, a pile of works devoted to technical development for flute. Now, what Guiot has done is not exactly something that is contained in books, but I wanted to look as much as you can at the higher picture there. The things that are behind, those are not scratches, those are his technical exercises that were tailored for each different class. We have those. The So either we got better or we got better. Those exercises were supposed and actually worked for developing control and dexterity, but also freedom and creativity when we play. He influenced, I would say, an immense number of flutists in younger generations, and I will show you what that means in maybe one or two more slides. And he also, I want to say that he not only composed pieces like the ones I'm going to play, 3 of them, in tonight's recital, but the amount of music he has composed is also large, and many pieces have been tailored for all the different levels in the flute studies career. So there are pieces for beginners, pieces for elementary level, and pieces for advanced levels, mid-levels, everything. About technical exercises, because he is very famous in the flute world for this, I just made this short quotation of himself, Guiot, talking about Moy's and how it relates to his approach to technique. He tells that Moy's teaching ideas on structure, logic, and efficiency made him develop his own teaching around Moy's ideas. What he calls formules, I know this is not what it means in English, so let's call it patterns, okay? They are tailored for each precise situation, and that helps to improve our proficiency when we play, our dexterity when we play different kind of difficult passages. Difficult passages are not necessarily just related to fingers. Yes, that's part of it, but we know that there is much more than just fingers in what we do. And it can be related to embouchure or to airstream, to support management, to breathing, to creativity, to see where a pattern changes. So those are the things we work with in those kind of scratches you saw in the previous slide. And the principles that apply for those patterns Guiot made for his classes are mainly that some memorization is required. Not all of it is written, then you have to memorize some parts of it to be able to continue on the game. You have to use your ears, you cannot be just blindly playing. You have to use your ears and make sense of what you play. Develop your imagination and what he loved to call control. And that means not only, it's what we call here maybe awareness about the technique, but also self-control. If we could not contain ourselves in the moment of a class, then we were completely unable to play what he proposed. Okay, I promised to show you some of the results he can offer as a teacher, I would say, personally speaking. These are just some of the names of people who have made beautiful careers after working with him. Of course, that doesn't mean just with him, but it means he made some influence in them, and he helped them become what they are today. Names as, maybe you know James Ruther, who's an Australian flutist and international soloist, or maybe Nicaulis Alliey, who's a Japanese who won the Geneva and the Recital competitions. That is, wow, incredible. Dion Jackson, who is flute professor at the University of Connecticut. Those are some of the names you have there. But let's move to his composing life. One of the things that I didn't know, actually, even knowing him, even knowing he composed several pieces these are the works that are registered at the National Library in France. There are 313 works registered there. That, for somebody who was not just a composer, not only a composer, is a very active composing life. I find that he has three main compositional streams. In one hand, there is the classical stream. You are going to listen to one piece that corresponds to that tonight. And this part of his work consists not only, of course, of pieces for flute, but also includes contest pieces, commissions, and pedagogical works. There is another part of his production that is jazz, popular, and commercial music that's squarely that, what you just found on the Handle with Care, that is kind of the case. Okay? And things he composed for his works and his collaborations with these jazz and bossa nova players of the time. And the third case is what is called the third stream, that mixes kind of in equal proportions the jazz and popular music side with the classical result. In his case, it was the natural result of his life experience. That was natural to happen. And this will be the last piece I will play for you tonight with Dimitra. And that piece you will see is very, very mixed, and it's his latest piece among the group of pieces I'm going to play. So I think it is part of the maturity process he had. This is a piece that was composed much later than the other two. He also made some film scores. He composed 7 film scores for, of course, French films. 4 names. The directors are there, enumerated. Melvin, Guiot, Romberger. Maybe you don't know them, but I found interesting to see that a flutist, somebody who is well known mainly for his technical work in flute, has even composed film music. Okay, his compositions for flute. The first thing about his music for flute is that it shows evidence of the major musical influences of his life. In one part, we can put or find the French flute tradition, Moïse, Tafanel, the Paris Conservatoire. In another place, we find the jazz language and the rhythms and this part of the popular music that is rhythmical and contagious, but within a classical frame. And what he calls rhetorical, we call here rhetorical repetition. For him, that's insistence. And I would like to take just a few seconds to clarify the rhetorical repetition. The rhetorical repetition, the rhetorical repetition, and the rhetorical repetition. That is what that means. That is an insistence. And for him, anything that was proposed more than twice, maybe more than once, was necessarily more interesting the second time, and even more the third time. And if there is a fourth, okay, do something about it. So that was part of his principles when we performed for him the repertoire, and this is something he uses much in his pieces. You will see it. In the other part of the evidences we have is the pedagogy, the pedagogical work he made, how the patterns and principles he used to work with as a teacher, how they reflect, how they relate to this music. Of course, some memorizing is required. Open your ears. It requires mindfulness. This is a control. He talks so much about still now, and technical dexterity. And of course, as a flutist, and such a flutist, or 23 years old, it was dedicated to Jean-Pierre Rampal, who was almost a contemporary of Guiot. They lived most of their life, let's say, very, very close in time. Guiot is still alive, happily. Rampal is not. Rampal was a little older. However, Rampal was the best known flutist in the 20th century and very probably the first flute star internationally recognized. So he dedicated this piece to Jean-Pierre Rampal as a proof of his admiration for him. It is not written or commissioned as a contest piece, but it has all the flavor of a Paris Conservatory piece, and that means that this has a section that is a slow, singing cantabile, something for expressing more, and another portion that is contrasting, in this case, two different movements. Prelude is one, and the finale is the other. And the finale is contrasting, it's rhythmic, is where most of the technical difficulties will be. I hope you won't notice them. And it has a cadenza in the middle of the second movement. And that's important because the Paris Conservatory required for these contest pieces that were composed right before the exam for graduation. Okay? They required those pieces to have a cadenza so that the performer could show, exhibit their not only dexterity in a setting of playing in tempo and things like that, but their imagination and creativity as artists too. The Prelude first is the first part we are going to listen. Has a very interesting thing, and it's a nod to Fauré. We will play a little bit of these two pieces, the beginning of the two pieces, for you to recognize as a flutist who studied in the time a little bit after Fauré's composing probably this fantasy. He drew that piece. He was in the same conservatory. They were in the same ambience. And Fauré, this fantasy by Fauré that is on the top, is a signature piece for every flutist in the world today. So he makes a nod at 22 or 23 years old to that piece and starts his prelude almost exactly in the same way. Almost, because he was already in jazz and popular music. Let's play a little bit of that. This is just the beginning of once again, and instead of making just a passage to the dominant, he makes a flat dominant, which means instead of making, and then come back to E, to the tonic, you will make. During the piece, don't expect to hear it like this, but at some point you will feel something happening, and that will be the flat 5. Okay, then the jazz influence is obviously stated in the dissonances and the suspensions of the 7. That is the leading tone. So instead of ending as you expected, don't expect it to end that way. You will see. And he uses hemiolas. The hemiolas are these things in rhythm when we count 1, 2, 3, and then we count 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That is called hemiola, and that uses it for also expressive proposals and to make changes in the music. So, shall we? Oh, the final. Final. Here, for the finale of the piece, second movement is called finale. It's not just the end of the piece. He uses a combined measure that I tried to show there. He states in the beginning, this can be either in 12 or in big 4. So it's either ta 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 ta, and we know it when we see the score. Then we have the main motive that is there that is the main pattern, the rhythmical pattern, and that pattern at some point will get magnified, augmented, rhythmically speaking. There will be technical passages that require all this mindfulness and technique and control related to the class exercises. In the middle of the movement, you will find there is a slow section, a minor section, where the real difficulty is in the embouchure. That is something you love to work in class, and I will show you those exercises a little further. And it is based on that order. Did it finish? Okay. There will be fast descending grace notes. That is something he also worked a lot in class. And well, the rhythmic augmentation of the main motive. For the cadenza, one of the important things here as a flutist is that at the time he was in the conservatory, Dutilleux was part of the repertoire, part of what they played already, and that was new and was exciting. And he made some nod to Dutilleux in two ascending scales that happened during the cadenza that marked like a rhetorical repetition of a long portion, with also double tonguing and rhetorical treatment of ideas. Then those two ascending scales will respond to part of the music he has already taught us, but in the shape of the harmony, and will respond also to what he writes as the main motive. You might recognize something like in the middle of that cadence. Not exactly that way, but you will see the development of the series of sound. Then the closing section will return to the main motive and to C major, key of that section. This is some of the things he made in class. The left side are my class notes. The right side is what he wrote in this composition. So things like, this is a noise sonorité, and you find it with almost the same thing. If it was an exercise, it would look like that. Then the lower part will binary pattern.